My guest today speaks regularly at events around the world, including SearchLove, MozCon, and AdTech. He's CEO of an online marketing services firm that's been established for more than 20 years. Welcome, Ian Lurie.
Thanks, David.
Well, thanks, Ian. Thanks so much for joining us. Ian, if I could first of all maybe take you back to your 1996 self, and if we could imagine that we catapulted you forward to the present day, do you reckon that old self of you would still recognize SEO today?
I think so. I mean, 1996, there was no real SEO, but I think so because the basic principles are still, they're the same. People search for stuff, and you want to make sure you're found for stuff. The rules have obviously changed a lot. Links certainly weren't a thing in 1996, but I think the basic principles were the same.
Yeah, 1990. Maybe I went too far back then. That's obviously way before Google. Possibly about the birth of Alta Vista or something like that,
I think
isn't
Alta Vista was around it. I think I got my first ban in around 1997.
First ban.
Yeah, I didn't quite know. I was done with bans by 1998, so I behaved myself after that.
Okay, and were you seriously involved in search engine optimization as far back as the late 90s, or did you not really pay much attention to it until Google really came on the scene?
Paid pretty close attention starting at about 98, I would say, when we built our first kind of real estate site. It was a virtual tour site, and at that point, getting a decent ranking on Yahoo was pretty important, and that's when we really got into it.
Okay, great. Obviously we've covered the fact that you've got an extensive background in digital marketing in SEO. So maybe looking forward into the future now, do you think that SEO in the year 2020 might change significantly, or are the basic principles still likely to stay the same?
I actually do think that the basic principles will be the same, but I think it's also going to change significantly. How's that for a total cop-out?
Well, that's all right, as long as you expanded it.
I mean, I think we're going to see a lot more passive search.
Okay.
I think what you're going to see now is search results increasingly happening because of a person's behavior, because of their location, because of preferences that they've indicated expressly. I think we're already starting to see that happen. So, just as an example now, I'll get a link on my phone that's, and actually, let me back up. Maybe that's the best way to go at this is, the biggest change right now is that search is increasingly focused on mobile. And I know that's been talked about a lot, but I think we're finally really seeing that. Search has been a utility for 10 or 15 years, where if it went away, people would definitely notice. But now mobile search is becoming a real utility, so that if I'm walking around in London, I can look down at my phone and it will say, explore restaurants near you. And I can just click that button and immediately see things that are, see places to eat that are right near me. I'm starting to see, Google Now, their cards, right, that show up and tell me things and indicate interesting things. They're showing news, they're showing nearby locations, whatever. I'm starting to see Google on my Android phone tell me that because I'm about to commute home, there's a place I can get gas nearby. So you're starting to see little things like that, and I do think that's a bigger change in the way search works.
So, I mean, we often hear the phrase "mobile first." Do you think, and we've seen Google really actually put that into play even in their desktop search results. Do you think Google are going to continue to do that, or do you think they may actually distinguish a little bit more in the future between the results they offer in their desktop or larger screens and mobile?
I think they'll continue to work with large screens, but I think mobile first is really, I think that's where they're going. I think, what screen do people look at the most is the real question. For Google especially, and I think for most social media, if they're going to have any kind of search or passive, passive delivery of the most useful content, which to me is a form of search because they got to figure out what's most useful. I think it's going to be mobile devices. I think it's going to increasingly move towards Also, I hate the expression Internet of Things, but I guess I have to say it. Also towards the Internet of Things, where your refrigerator or whatever figures out the best price for something. The Amazon Dot, maybe it does something based on that. The Echo, right, is connected to Alexa. So I think you're going to see more and more of that. But right now, mobile is where this is pushing, and I think 5 or 6 years from now, mobile will still be the biggest driver.
So I'm sorry to use the phrase again, but do you think the Internet of Things will lead to a reduced quantity of searches, active searches, being done in the future?
And I should say, I don't really hate the term. It's one of those broadly applicable things, and I'm all about specificity. So I do think it's going to decrease the number of performed searches. I also think it's going to change what we consider a search. So, for example, with the Echo, I can say, "What's the weather going to be like?" Right, and it comes back and says the weather will be, etc. You're still doing a search, but you're speaking it, and the answer is being delivered to you through audio, not through video, or not through a screen. So I think that the way we do explicit searches, the way we actually go and actively search for something, is going to change.
So what might be an example of 1 or 2 markets that are more likely to be more affected by this presumed search behavior, and what can businesses within that type of market actually do to prepare for that?
Well, I think local retail is already being impacted, and I think they have to start looking actively at technologies like beacons. Obviously, they have to clean up their local search act. I still see lots of retailers and local businesses that just don't have their local search house in order. They need to do that. You need to take ownership of your listings. You need to stay on top of what helps you rank in the 3-pack or the 7-pack or whatever it becomes. It's going to change. Work with an agency. It's usually not that expensive, or do it on your own. It's not that hard. But I also think looking at beacons, looking at geographically driven search, being aware of that, just being aware of kind of how you can provide data to people based on their location and context. So I think that's one really big place that retailers have to look. And then I think news is the other one. I think proper tagging and delivery of news. You can't actively optimize news. You can actively optimize. Sorry, it's still early here. Optimize news for delivery in Google Search, Google News, and similar search engines, but you can't necessarily actively optimize for delivery on news-specific search engines and tools. But what you can do is make sure everything's tagged the way it should be. Right? Just make sure everything's put together the way that it should be. Make sure your content is properly organized. That's really what you need to be doing when it comes to news. And then almost anyone, any site under any circumstances, they're going to have to pay more and more attention to how they build their content. We haven't really talked about it, but things like the answer box, things like the knowledge box, those are all places and ways that search engines are going to experiment with information and content delivery. You need to just make sure that your content is organized. When I say content, I mean everything, product pages, whatever. Again, properly tagged, properly structured. But that's how you really kind of future-proof yourself. Because I feel like I just babbled.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that for the ad boxes, for the answer boxes, for the knowledge graph, you're completely referring to Google search results. Is that the only place that local businesses should be concerned about? Do you think that something like a Facebook could move into the search space and actually become a more important place for local businesses to optimize their listings within in the future?
It's an interesting question. So far, Facebook is a lousy search engine, and I don't see how they fix that. I will say, though, that they're, again, as passive search, they're pretty powerful, right, because of the way that they organize their news feeds. And I do think you have to be ready for that. Right now in the search world, Google just dominates. I mean, even the ComScore numbers that go out there aren't necessarily accurate. Bing may have 5 or 6% of the market, but that's it. So in the search engine space, it's clearly Google. Off of Google, yeah, you want to look at things like Facebook, anything that has a feed that is algorithmically determined. You want to make sure that you're pretty well set to have best possible optimization of that content. The difference is on Facebook, it's much more, again, about tagging, and it's about engagement and interaction. So you need to really design your content, design your site around that.
And what about in the way that Google's algorithm might evolve in the future? Do you think that links will still play one of the most important parts in it in 4 years' time? Will social signals play a greater part? Is there anything else like AI, like rank brain, that is going to become essential? What are your thoughts on the future of the algorithm?
I try not to predict where Google's going because you never know what's going on in their tiny little heads. But they seem to be stuck on links. Links still seem to be a huge part of their algorithm. I would love to see that change because it's still far too easily gained. But if not, well, all of our clients seem to be stuck on links. I don't know if Google will stay stuck on links, but right now they are. Links are a pretty big ranking factor. I would hope that they'll move more towards not so much social signals, but again, contextual signals. For me, Google just wants to deliver the most perfect information for me. That's how they make money. So the more sophisticated they can get at determining what perfect is, the better off they're going to be and the better off we're going to be. Right now, links are their best guide, I think, for offsite, and then for onsite, obviously, it's the way information's tagged, the way it's written, quality of that information, speed of delivery. I hope that they'll move more towards that. RankBrain is really an engine that helps guide the algorithm. I suspect if they see that out, if they see the engine become more and more accurate, they may let RankBrain play a bigger part in determining how rankings are built. But RankBrain is not something you optimize for. It's not an algorithm in and of itself. So I think the big change for Google will be moving more and more towards not so much artificial intelligence, but I guess artificial intelligence. Letting things like RankBrain make more and more recommendations to Google as to what the best rankings are.
Okay, and as far as social signals go, or the importance of different social networks, if you want to call them that, do you think that Google will start to include more other social network results? I mean, it's got a bit of a partnership with Twitter as we speak. Will Google actually want to include social results more in its SERP results to actually try and be more relevant with regards to the discussions that are currently going on at that moment?
I think the social graph does really interest them. There's a very high correlation between social results and rankings, but it's hard to tell. It could just be that it's because lots of people start being interested in the content as opposed to they're expressly tracking social signals. I think they're interested in the social graph. I think they're interested in behavior around content. I think that there's a lot more, they've left a lot more in place of things like author rank and publisher rank than we may understand. Whether they will start tracking social signals precisely, I think social signals have to get a lot harder to game than they are right now. So I think right now maybe social velocity has an effect. I've seen some of that happen, but I don't know so much about actual social, like more likes on Facebook. I don't know if that's will ever be a direct signal.
Okay, by social velocity, do you mean the speed of uptake in the number of likes and shares of a particular piece of content in a short period of time?
Yeah. The best case studies I've got for that, the best evidence are, we've had a couple times when we've had a piece of content just go ballistic on Twitter and start ranking very, very quickly for a pretty challenging keyword. The example I always go back to is I gave a talk about agency tips for running an agency, did a blog post on it at the same time. It started getting dozens and dozens of tweets in the course of 10 or 15 minutes, and it ranked #1 for agency tips on non-personalized search within 10 minutes, which is just,
Wow,
how
yeah.
exactly that happened. I don't know what else it could have been, right? It's not like links were appearing all over the place. That was pretty high velocity. Again, correlation, maybe not causation, but that's a pretty strong correlation.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, the impact that certain things like a sudden increase in click-through rate, or Rand was saying a lot of traffic from a source like an email newsletter can be seen to sometimes impact ranking significantly as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, it's hard to know for sure. It's hard to test that particular measure, but we do know that Google looks at things like click-through, and they do track absolutely everything we do, assuming you're using Gmail or anything else. It's hard to believe that they're not looking at some of that data to figure out what a really remarkable piece of information is. So yeah, I would suspect that they're looking at that somehow, and that really good newsletter results seem to have an impact more quickly than Google is crawling content and looking at links. So the newsletter may impact rankings within a few hours, and certainly it's not like there's links being built within that time period.
I also believe that you mentioned something to do with clients being focused on metrics that possibly you would prefer them not to be focused on. Do you believe, is it the case that certain clients have too great a focus on tracking core keyword phrases and their rankings still at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, they're obsessed. And I understand it, right? It's one of those metrics. Because we can't track keywords in Google Analytics or any other analytics software anymore, they want to see something. And looking at organic search results or organic search traffic may not be enough for them, because they're looking and saying, well, that may all be branded. And even if the traffic goes up, they may not attribute it directly to non-branded organic search.
So do you think this is likely to change in the future?
No.
No.
I think that plus links, we get call after call after call from clients of potential clients of all sizes, and they all ask, the first thing they ask is, what keywords can you help us rank for? The second thing they ask is, how many links can you get us? The third thing they ask is, can you get us results within 4 weeks? So those three questions are all. Oh, and the fourth question, which I just actually wrote about, is how much content will I need to, whatever their goal is.
Yes, yeah. Those kind of challenges have been around for quite a long time, and it doesn't sound as if they're going away.
No.
And what about the future of website design itself? Obviously, with the increased use of mobile, responsive design has just about become the norm. Is that the way to go for most websites? Can you see anything significantly different coming down the pike in terms of how a website should be designed in terms of maximizing, optimizing user experience?
Well, there's no downside to responsive design that I can think of, and I'm not a designer, so I'm sure there's significant disagreement with me out there. Obviously, you lose some control over how a site looks once you're doing responsive. I don't see a downside to it. I do think site performance, as things like click-through become more and more important and bounce back become more and more important in rankings. And again, I know it's correlation, not causation, but again, it's really high correlation. And we have tested that very directly. But as those things become bigger and bigger factors, I do think site performance is becoming even more important. I think that designers and developers need to now look away from just reducing the overall weight of the page, the size of the page in bytes. They can put a little more effort into speedier delivery of large chunks of content. So doing some kind of phased delivery of content, deferring the really big stuff. Those things can be almost as impactful as just compressing your images. Compressing your images is easier, but I do think site speed is something you want to emphasize in design. And then, of course, Google and Facebook are coming out with things like AMP, right? And Facebook Instant Articles, and you have to look at those. I don't actually think AMP has a huge future for a lot of reasons, but I do think that some of those very channel-specific, site venue-specific, excuse me, venue-specific delivery platforms are going to start to be a bigger and bigger deal. If you can, you may as well code for them. So I think those are pretty important factors as well.
So you don't think the majority of businesses should be looking to publish their blogs as AMP pages as well?
I already got myself in trouble because of a prediction I made at SEMPDX Search Fest, but I just don't, I never see platform-specific delivery acceleration platforms do all that well. I just don't see them perform that well. Facebook is not opening instant articles up to everybody, at least not last that I checked. AMP doesn't allow you to use Google Tag Manager, so that certainly complicates things. And if I'm a small business, I don't think I'd go for AMP right now. I don't think I'd put in the extra resources. If you're a publisher, you absolutely do AMP. But remember, you're also only appearing in the carousel. It's not, you can't be assured that it's gonna improve overall rankings. It will give you that key position if it's being used to deliver into that carousel, if you're doing AMP right, if Google continues to support AMP, and if it hasn't sucked up your entire budget to the point where the rest of your website just sucks, so you end up with a lousy experience even though you're using AMP. I will say I've tested it in spite of my skepticism, and it's fast. AMP-enabled pages are nearly instantaneous, which is pretty cool.
And do people tend to... So I'm getting a bit of an echo there at the moment here, but if I just talk it through, I'll be all right, I'm sure. Do people tend to, when they actually interact with AMP pages, just view that page and then go back to the Google results? Is that one of the reasons why commercially it could be a challenging decision to actually take to decide to publish them?
I certainly don't have any information, any data on that. Okay. I do think AMP is, Google is becoming an aggregator and a publisher, if they weren't already. They don't necessarily want you to leave Google. And if they don't want you to leave Google, then they're going to do everything they can to keep you on AMP pages and not have you leave and go to the main website.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter if Google makes AMP. If AMP becomes the dominant feature in the rankings, you're still going to have to optimize for it just to get your content in front of them. There's one other interesting angle to AMP that I just want to put out there, which is it could make it harder for ad blockers to block advertising. And if that's the case, then there's an upside for Google and everybody else, and that you can push your ads, everyone except the user, because you can push your ads in front of them.
That's possibly a conspiracy theory there.
It's not. I mean, it's just ad blockers are a major problem. They're going to be a major problem, and one way around them, one way is to just come up with other ways to get your marketing message in front of people, like native content, sponsored content, etc. The other way is to develop technologies that just can't be blocked.
And talking about ads, how do you see the future integration between paid ads and organic? Do you think that the number of paid ads are simply going to increase in number over the years? Will we see a greater integration between paid and organic over the years?
Well, I think smart publishers are going to reduce the number of ads and go for higher impact per ad. I think you just saw Google do that because they took away the right rail. And that's partly because they just, if they were making money off the right rail, they never would have done that. Clearly, the right rail isn't making them as much money as they would like. So I think going for fewer and more impactful ads is going to be the trend. I do see a lot more sites using popovers and blurring the bottom half of the content to book the ad and doing things like that. That's a terrible experience. And just because it's a terrible experience doesn't mean that it's a failure. It's a terrible experience, and it's going to become kind of a prisoner's dilemma where someone's going to defect eventually and stop doing that, and then everyone else is going to have to follow suit. But I think as long as those ads still perform, you're going to see more and more of them, aside from in a very small number of venues like Google.
So we're talking about ads a bit here, but the framework of the discussion is the future of SEO. Do you think that means that SEOs in general need to be aware of as many different forms of digital marketing activities as possible, or is it still possible for an SEO to be very successful, and will it still be possible for an SEO to be very successful in the future by just focusing on maybe one aspect of SEO, like technical SEO?
No. You've got to understand tech. You've got to understand all the aspects. When it comes to advertising, you have to understand how you can use advertising to promote the content assets that may or may not help you rank. You have to understand the impact of lots of ads on your rankings, right? You know that Google, the Panda algorithm or whatever you're using at this point, does look at the number of ads on a page and is definitely going to, if they see a poor user experience because of ads, it's going to be harder to rank. And then generally, SEOs have to be pretty well-rounded. I mostly see offsite SEOs and content marketers who have no idea how the technical side works. So they'll put tons of effort into links and content when there are complete deal-breaking technical problems on the site. So kind of transitioning away from ads for a minute, I think SEOs have to have a pretty solid understanding of on-site, off-site, and the best places to go to do outreach through advertising.
Well, so lots of wonderful, interesting insight there that you've shared. But just to conclude, what would you say, in summary, businesses need to be doing now, which is still likely to be a valid strategy in 4 years' time, in the year 2020?
Build good sites, write good stuff, make sure you're clear and understandable. And those are things that have always worked in marketing. They will continue to work. And no matter how Google messes with their algorithm, if your site performs well, it works, it's properly tagged and configured, and then if your content is compelling, again, all of its content, you're going to do well no matter how Google changes their algorithm.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us. How can our viewers and listeners get hold of you, Ian?
You can find me on Twitter at PortentInt. It's PortentInt. And you can visit my company's website at portent.com.
Superb. Okay, well, thanks again.
Okay, thanks, David.